Well, many of us will remember the story of James Ashby and Peter Slipper and that long-running set of court cases that occurred and some pretty grubby detail that emerged during a lot of that. James Ashby now, of course, the One Nation Chief of Staff to Pauline Hanson. Well, he's now apparently taking the federal government to court because he'd like his court costs paid for in the same way that Peter Slipper's court costs were paid for, is something called an act of grace, which has actually been refused of James Ashby in the last little while. So in the last 2 weeks, he's filed papers, as we mentioned a little earlier, to pursue something like $3.5–4 million in court costs. So let's just remind ourselves of what these court costs were about. Ross Jones is here. Ross is the author of Ashbygate, and he was looking at this case for many years. Morning, Ross.
Morning.
So just remind us of the order of events here. Peter Slipper had the case thrown out. What was the case? What was the original case about?
Well, sexual harassment.
And
James was claiming Peter sexually harassed him.
And that initially was thrown out, and then the appeal, James Ashby launched an appeal to that.
Yes.
And who took on that case for him?
Well, Harmer's lawyers were James's lawyers.
Wasn't there I thought they were taking that on pro bono.
Well, yes, but that was supposed to be happening. That's true. Whether it was happening or not, I never actually discovered. I could never actually. It was an awful lot of money, wasn't it? And the Harmers are a pretty big law firm, but there was always a suspicion that there was there may have been funding. Sorry, I got a bit.
Yes, I'm happy for you to choose your words carefully, Ross. That's okay.
Well, also you've got to remember, I haven't really looked at Ashby for a year or so.
Well, but he withdrew the case, didn't he? In the end, the case.
Yes, he did. Well, he won the right to appeal.
Yes.
He lost his first case against Reyes. Reyes just threw it out of court.
Yes, that's right.
Ashby and Harmers then appealed, and the appeal was granted. Well, two of the three appeal judges, gave it the go-ahead. And then there was much to do and much hoo-ha about how we're going to appeal and prove how correct we were all along. And then the case just was let quietly die, as far as I could see.
But during that time where they were in the appeal, something like $3.67 million of legal fees have emerged, have they?
I understand it was well over $3 million. In fact, James himself told me that in one telephone conversation.
And this idea that the act of grace allowance for ministers or government members is used to pay their costs, is that? Do you understand that's the kind of argument he's using to get his costs paid?
I'm no expert in these matters, but yeah, that's my understanding of it. Yes. Yeah.
Do you know what Peter Slipper's costs were?
He never actually told me, but they were substantial. I mean, he had his legal team were pretty robust, so it wouldn't have been cheap.
What's your expectation of the success of Mr. Ashby in pursuing these costs from the taxpayer?
Well, I had not heard about any of this until this morning, and I still I'm not really across the detail of it at the moment. But I would say, can I use the expression bugger all?
I see. The same as the snowball's chance in a very hot place.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And no expectation here that One Nation would somehow be able to be used in some kind of, I don't know, power, generate a bit more interest or sway behind the scenes or anything like that?
Well, look, it's such a complex world in there. The One Nation world is a very, very strange place. There was always a suspicion amongst, I speak to a lot of ex-One Nation people, probably in it by now, but there was always widespread suspicion that James was a plant for the Liberal Party. That's whether it's true or not is, I'm not commenting on that, but that's certainly true that it's a widespread suspicion amongst members and former members of One Nation who believe they were betrayed by James, and he sidetracked Pauline and made her lose track of the goal and turned her into the person she is today.
Okay.
And so there's an enormous resentment against him amongst One Nation people.
Okay. Ross, thank you. The book by Ross is Ashbygate, if you're interested to revisit some of that stuff. A lot of that here based locally, of course, on the Sunshine Coast.